Are you actually on track to become wealthy? The two clocks nobody talks about. Imagine waking up tomorrow and reading a headline that says America created thousands of new millionaires while millions of ordinary households became financially weaker. At first, it sounds like a contradiction. How can the country be producing more millionaires while so many people are struggling to feel financially secure? The answer is simple, but it changes the way you should think about money. Wealth is not measured by one scoreboard. There is one scoreboard tracking how much wealth exists. There is another tracking how much financial freedom ordinary people actually have. And those two numbers can move in completely different directions. That's why you can read about record stock market wealth, record home prices, and record numbers of millionaires, then open your own banking app and think, wait, am I actually getting ahead? Maybe you've had that feeling. Your salary is higher than it was several years ago. Your retirement account has grown. You've paid down some debt. Maybe you've even bought a house. And yet somehow you don't feel wealthy. You feel like you're constantly running. You earn more, you spend more, you save more, but the finish line seems to move every time you get closer. That's because personal finance isn't controlled by one clock. It's controlled by two. The first clock is working in your favor. It's called compounding. The second clock is working against you. It's the rising cost of maintaining the life you're trying to build. And whether you eventually become financially independent depends heavily on which clock wins. So today, we're going to forget the flashy millionaire headlines for a moment. Instead, we're going to answer a much more useful question. Are you actually on track? Not compared with a billionaire. Not compared with your neighbor. Not compared with some random retirement chart on the internet. But on track for the life you personally want. The $1 million illusion. Let's start with a word almost everyone understands. Millionaire. The word sounds enormous. Say it out loud. Millionaire. It immediately creates an image. A luxury house, a sports car, first-class flights, a giant investment account. Maybe a person sitting beside a swimming pool while checking a portfolio worth 7 figures. But here's the uncomfortable truth. $1 million doesn't automatically make you financially free. Imagine someone has a net worth of $1 million. Sounds fantastic. But suppose $750,000 of that wealth is tied up in the house they live in. They only have $250,000 in investments. Now imagine another person with a $1 million investment portfolio who rents a modest home and has very low expenses. Those two people have identical net worths, but they don't have identical financial freedom. That's why net worth is important, but it isn't everything. Your spending matters, your debt matters, your income matters, your savings rate matters, and most importantly, your time matters. This is where many people misunderstand wealth. They compare their current number with somebody else's current number. But wealth isn't a photograph, it's a movie. You're not competing with someone's balance today. You're looking at what your assets can become over the next 10, 20, or 30 years. And that's where compounding enters the story. Meet the 3 people. Let's pick. Imagine 3 completely fictional people. Their names aren't important. Their financial behavior is. The first is Marcus. Marcus is 42 years old. He's an electrician and earns around $65,000 a year. He's good at his job. He's dependable. He's been working with his hands for years, but his body has started sending him warnings. His knees hurt. His back isn't what it used to be. And he's beginning to realize that climbing ladders and crawling through attics may not be something he wants to do at 65. Marcus doesn't dream about becoming unbelievably rich. He wants something much simpler. He wants the ability to reduce his workload before his body forces him to. Then there's Elena. She's 28. She's a dental hygienist earning around $85,000 a year. She doesn't come from a wealthy family. She doesn't have a giant inheritance waiting for her. She doesn't own a business. But Elena has something Marcus wishes he had possessed at 28. Time. She started investing early. Not with enormous amounts, a few $100s each month. She doesn't constantly check her investments. She doesn't spend weekends trying to predict which stock will explode next. She simply keeps putting money into a diversified portfolio. Then we have Daniel. Daniel is 42 as well. He's a software developer, making around $130,000 a year. That's roughly twice Marcus's income. If you looked only at salary, you would assume Daniel is far ahead. But Daniel has a problem. Every time his income increases, his lifestyle increases too. His first apartment became a nicer apartment. Then he bought a house. His old car became a newer SUV. His inexpensive vacations became expensive vacations. Restaurants became delivery. A modest home became a larger home. And every raise seemed to disappear before he could enjoy the feeling of having more money. Daniel isn't stupid. He isn't irresponsible. That's important. He's doing something millions of reasonable people do. He's allowing his lifestyle to grow alongside his income. And because every increase feels justified, he doesn't notice how much future wealth is disappearing. Now, fast forward 20 years. Who do you think has the most financial freedom? You might immediately choose Daniel. After all, he earns twice as much as Marcus. But that's where the story becomes interesting. Because income tells you how much money enters your life. It doesn't tell you how much money stays there. And that distinction can completely change your financial future. The gap is your engine. Imagine two people, both earning $100,000. Person A spends $95,000. Person B spends $65,000. Person A looks richer. They might drive the nicer car, they might live in the nicer neighborhood, they might take better vacations. But person B has something much more valuable, a $35,000 annual gap. That gap can become investments, and those investments can eventually produce more investments. This is why your savings rate can sometimes tell you more about your financial progress than your salary. You don't invest your paycheck, you invest what survives your lifestyle. Someone earning $60,000 and investing $12,000 a year can be building wealth more aggressively than someone earning $150,000 and investing $8,000. The second person has the impressive income. The first person has the stronger wealth-building machine. The machine works like this. Income comes in. Expenses go out.
The difference becomes capital. Capital buys assets. Assets generate returns. Returns create more capital. And eventually, your money starts doing a meaningful amount of the work that your labor used to do. That's when your financial life changes. Clock number 1, compounding. Now, let's talk about the first clock, compounding. Suppose Elena starts investing $600 every month when she's 28. She doesn't know what the stock market will do next year. Nobody does. Some years will be excellent. Some years will be painful. Some years will feel completely boring. But let's use a hypothetical long-term return of around 7% annually. If she continues investing for several decades, her contributions can potentially grow into a substantial portfolio. And here's the important part. The money she invests in her 20s has something money invested in her 40s doesn't have. More time. Imagine putting a small snowball at the top of a hill. For the first few minutes, it doesn't look impressive. It's barely growing. You might even wonder why you're bothering. But if the hill is long enough, the snowball eventually becomes enormous. Compounding behaves similarly. The early years can feel disappointing. The later years can feel almost unbelievable. That's why people sometimes underestimate what consistent investing can accomplish. They look at the first 5 years and assume the strategy isn't working. But compounding is not designed to impress you immediately. Its biggest advantage appears later. And that creates one of the most important financial lessons you'll ever learn. You cannot buy back lost compounding time. You can invest more money. You can increase your income. You can reduce your expenses. But you can't go backward and give your 40-year-old self the opportunity to invest at 25. That's why starting matters so much. The second clock. But there's another clock running at the exact same time. This one doesn't care about your investment account. It measures the cost of living the life you want. Housing can become more expensive. Healthcare can become more expensive. Education can become more expensive. Childcare can become more expensive. Insurance can become more expensive. And sometimes your lifestyle becomes more expensive.
simply because your expectations change. When you were 22, perhaps you were happy with a tiny apartment and an old car. Then you got a better job. Suddenly you wanted a nicer apartment. Then you got married. Then you had children. Now you need more space. The old car isn't practical anymore. You need another vehicle. The house needs repairs. The children need activities. And suddenly the lifestyle that once seemed luxurious becomes your new normal. That's the second clock. The cost of the finish line keeps moving. And that's why simply earning more money isn't enough. You need your assets to grow faster than the cost of the life you're trying to fund. The most dangerous raise. Let's go back to Daniel. Daniel gets a $20,000 raise. Everyone congratulates him. And they should. More income is good. But then something happens. His rent or mortgage increases. He upgrades his vehicle. He starts traveling more. His restaurant spending increases. He buys better technology. He subscribes to more services. None of these purchases looks outrageous by itself. That's the problem. Lifestyle inflation rarely arrives as
One giant mistake. It arrives as a collection of tiny, permanent decisions. An extra $200 here, another $150 there, a new monthly payment, a bigger house, a newer car, a few additional subscriptions, a more expensive vacation. Individually, each decision seems manageable. Together, they can consume an entire raise. And Daniel eventually discovers something strange. His salary has increased dramatically, but his financial freedom hasn't. He earns more. He spends more. He saves roughly the same. So his future isn't changing nearly as quickly as his paycheck suggests. This is why every raise creates a choice. You can convert the raise into a better lifestyle, or you can convert part of it into future freedom. You don't have to choose 100% of either. That's the important part. You can enjoy some of your success. Just don't let every increase in income become a permanent increase in expenses. What about retirement benchmarks? You've probably seen those famous rules. 1 year's salary saved by a certain age, several times your salary by another age, then a much larger multiple approaching retirement. These guidelines can be useful, but they can also create unnecessary panic. Why? Because two people with the same salary can require completely different retirement portfolios. Suppose one person plans to spend $45,000 a year in retirement. Another wants $120,000. Clearly, they don't need identical portfolios. A homeowner without a mortgage has different expenses from a renter. Someone retiring at 60 has a different timeline from someone working until 70. Someone supporting family members has different obligations from someone living alone. So if an online calculator tells you you're behind, don't immediately panic. Ask a better question. What exactly am I trying to fund? Your retirement number should be connected to your future lifestyle, not somebody else's. $1 million isn't the finish line. Let's say you eventually accumulate $1 million. Congratulations, that's a major achievement. But now ask, how much does your life cost? If you need $100,000 every year to maintain your lifestyle, a $1 million portfolio is very different from having $1 million while spending $40,000. This is why financial independence isn't really about reaching a magical number. It's about creating a relationship between your assets and your expenses. The lower your required spending, the smaller the portfolio you may need. The larger your spending, the larger the portfolio required to support it. That's why a financially independent person might not look rich. They might drive an ordinary car, live in an ordinary house, wear ordinary clothes, and have a surprisingly large amount of freedom, because their money isn't being consumed by appearances. It's being used to purchase options. The real product of wealth is freedom. Think about what money actually gives you. It's not the number in the account. It's what that number allows you to do. Suppose you have 6 months of living expenses saved. A job loss is still stressful, but it's not immediately catastrophic. Suppose you have 2 years of expenses available. Now you can consider changing careers. Suppose your investments cover a significant percentage of your annual expenses.
Now you can negotiate differently. Maybe you work 4 days a week. Maybe you reject the toxic boss. Maybe you take 6 months away from work.
Maybe you start a business. Maybe you spend more time with your family. That's what wealth is buying. Control. The wealthy advantage isn't necessarily having more things, it's having more choices. Why starting late doesn't mean you're finished. Now let's talk about someone who is 45. They look at Elena, investing since 28. They look at their own account, and they think, it's too late. No, but the strategy may need to change. Starting later means you have less time, so you may need a higher savings rate. You may need to increase your income. You may need to reduce expenses. You may need to work longer. You may need to combine several strategies. But late and finished are not the same thing. Marcus is proof. At 42, he doesn't have Elena's time advantage, but he still has years ahead of him. If he consistently invests, avoids lifestyle inflation, eliminates expensive debt, and keeps improving his financial position, he can dramatically change his future. He doesn't need to become a millionaire overnight. He needs to make the next decade better than the previous one. That's a goal almost anyone can understand. The behavioral problem. There's one more obstacle, and it's not inflation. It's not the stock market. It's you. More specifically, your emotions. You can build an excellent investment strategy. Then the market falls. Your portfolio drops. The headlines become terrifying. Everyone online starts predicting disaster, and suddenly your brain tells you, get out. You sell. The market eventually recovers. You watch from the sidelines. Then prices rise. You buy back. And you've just turned a temporary market decline into a permanent investment mistake. This is why investing isn't only a math problem, it's a behavior problem. The best strategy isn't necessarily the one with the highest theoretical return. It's the one you can actually follow when the world looks frightening. Consistency beats cleverness surprisingly often. The good news nobody talks about. Now, here's the optimistic side. You have access to tools that previous generations didn't have. Low-cost investment funds are widely available. Automatic contributions are easy to set up. Fractional investing allows small amounts of money to participate in markets. Retirement accounts can automate long-term saving. You can track your spending instantly. You can calculate your net worth from your phone. The information barrier is lower than it has ever been for many investors. You don't need a private banker. You don't need to pick individual stocks. You don't need to predict the next technological revolution. You don't need to discover the next giant company before everyone else. You need a reasonable plan. Then you need the patience to let it work. That sounds boring, but boring is often exactly what successful long-term investing looks like. 5 questions to ask yourself. So, are you on track? Instead of asking whether your account has reached some magical number, ask yourself 5 questions. 1. How much of my income am I keeping? Not earning, keeping. A larger paycheck means little if nearly all of it disappears. 2. How much of that surplus is becoming productive assets? Saving is important, but long-term wealth usually requires turning surplus cash into assets capable of growing. 3. How much time does my money have? This determines how aggressively compounding can work. 20 years is very different from 5. 4. How expensive is my future lifestyle? This determines how much wealth you'll ultimately need. 5. What could derail the plan? High interest debt? No emergency fund? Lifestyle inflation? Emotional investing? Insufficient insurance? Depending on everything going perfectly? These questions are far more useful than simply asking, am I ahead of the average? Your first goal shouldn't be $1 million. If you're starting from zero, don't stare at the $1 million finish line. It can feel impossible. Instead, build milestones. First, create a small emergency reserve. Then build several months of essential expenses. Then eliminate expensive debt. Then increase your investment contributions. Then work toward your first $10,000 invested. Then $25,000. Then $50,000. Then $100,000. Each milestone changes your relationship with money. At first, your paycheck supports your life. Eventually, your savings support your future. Then your investments begin supporting themselves. And eventually, your portfolio can become large enough that the returns themselves represent meaningful amounts of money. That's when the psychological shift happens. You stop thinking of your investments as a pile of money. You start thinking of them as stored freedom. A year's expenses isn't merely cash, it's a year of options. A large investment portfolio isn't merely an impressive number, it's potential independence. Don't borrow someone else's finish line. Maybe you're 25, maybe you're 35, maybe you're 45, maybe you're 55. You might believe you're
behind because somebody online claims to have reached financial independence at an unusually young age. Don't let that person define your finish line. You don't know their starting point. You don't know their family circumstances. You don't know whether they inherited money. You don't know their expenses. You don't know their debt. And you don't know how much of their story is marketing. Your financial plan should be built around your life, not somebody else's highlight reel. Your objective isn't to look wealthy. Your objective is to become financially resilient. That's a completely different goal. The 2 clocks. So let's return to the beginning. There are 2 clocks running. The first clock measures the time your money has to compound. The second measures how quickly the cost of your desired lifestyle is changing. You can't completely stop the second clock. Prices will change. Life will change. Unexpected expenses will happen. But you can influence the first clock. You can start earlier. You can save consistently. You can increase contributions. You can keep investment costs reasonable. You can avoid unnecessary taxes where appropriate. You can reduce emotional decisions. You can prevent lifestyle inflation from consuming every raise. And you can give your assets time. That combination is powerful because eventually something extraordinary happens. Your portfolio becomes large enough that your contributions are no longer doing all the work. Your money starts carrying some of the load, then more of it. Then eventually, a meaningful part of your lifestyle can be supported without requiring every hour of your labor. That's the destination, not the millionaire label. Not the luxury car, not the perfect net worth percentile. Freedom. The final question? So tomorrow morning, don't open your banking app and ask, "Am I rich yet?" Ask something better. Is my financial position stronger than it was 12 months ago? Did your savings increase? Did your debt decrease? Did your investment contributions rise? Did your emergency fund improve? Did your spending become more intentional? Did you avoid unnecessary lifestyle inflation? Did you buy yourself more future choices? If the answer is yes, you're moving in the right direction. And that's what being on track actually means. You don't need to outrun everybody. You don't need to predict the market. You don't need a secret investment. You don't need to become wealthy overnight. You need to make your financial engine stronger every year. Because the ultimate goal isn't to have a number that impresses strangers. The goal is to reach a point where money stops controlling every decision you make. Where you can say no. No to the job you hate. No to the debt you don't need. No to spending just to impress people. No to working every hour simply because you have no choice. And yes to the things that actually matter. More time with your family. More control over your career. More flexibility. More peace. More choices. That's what wealth is really for. So remember the 2 clocks. One is quietly building your future. The other is quietly increasing its price. You don't have to make everything perfect. You just have to make sure the first clock keeps gaining ground. Start where you are, use what you have, increase the gap when you can. Invest consistently. Protect yourself from major financial disasters, and give the process enough time to work. Because the most powerful financial advantage isn't always a bigger paycheck. Sometimes it's simply refusing to stop.
And eventually, if you keep going long enough, your money begins doing something your paycheck never could. It begins buying back your time. And when your money can buy back your time, you've stopped merely accumulating wealth. You've started becoming free.